Good evening, everybody. Welcome. A freilich and Isru Chag of Shavuos. In this week's Parsha beahalotha, we have the famous pasuk where the Torah testifies as to the nature of Moshe Rabbeinu's humility. V'ha'ish Moshe anav ma'od mikol ha'adam asher al pnei ha'adama. Moshe was the humblest man on earth. And on this subject of humility of Anabva, there is a famous Mishnah and Gemara at the conclusion of Masechta Soita, which is connected both to the Parsha of beahalotha because of the above mentioned pasuk and also to the holiday of Shavuos. As many of you certainly know, there is a custom in some Jewish communities, in many communities, that during the 49 days of Sfiras HaOmer we learn Masechta Soita. The reason is because Masechta Soita has 49 dafim, 49 pages, Mem Tes dafim, corresponding to the 49 days of Sfiras HaOmer, and each day, beginning with the first day of Sfira, the second day of Pesach, till the final day, Erev Shavuos, we learn one day of Sfira, one blot, one page of Soita. Hence, the conclusion of Soita is studied, according to this custom, on Erev Shavuos. The last Mishnah of Masechta Soita, it's a long Mishnah, but the last words, the Mishnah says, Mishameis Rebbe batul anava v'yiras chet. When Rebbe passed away, humility and fear of sin have been nullified. They died too. Rebbe, of course, refers to Rabbi Yehuda Hanasi, Rabbi Judah the Prince, the author of the Mishnah, the great sage of Israel who lived in the century after the destruction of the second Beis Hamikdash and is responsible for the Mishnah that we have. When he passes away, batal anava v'yiras chet, humility and fear of sin are gone. The Gemara discusses, as usual, various aspects of the Mishnah, and then the siyum, the end of Masechta Soita is Amalei Rabbi Yosef Latana. Rabbi Yosef told the teacher. Tana means the one who learns and teaches the Mishnayos to the students, to the people who come to learn in yeshiva. So Rabbi Yosef told the Tana, the one who was teaching the Mishnah, Loi tisna nava. Don't teach this stanza of the Mishnah that when Rebbe died, humility went with him too. Why not? The ikana, because there is I. As Rashi says, Shani anvas, I am an anav, I am humble. So you can't teach the students and say that Mishameis Rebbe, when Rebbe passed away, batal anova, the concept, the embodiment of humility has become obsolete, has been nullified, it's gone with Rebbe. The ikana, I am here, I am humble. I embody the quality of humility. Amalei Reb Nachman Latana. Rav Nachman, who was a colleague of Rabbi Yosef, told the teacher, Leitisna yiras chet. You delete the stanza, the part of the Mishnah that says when Rebbe passed away, fear of sin was gone. The ikana, because I am here and I embody fear of sin. Rabbi Yosef had no problem with saying Mishameis Rebbe batla yiras chet, that when Rebbe died, fear of sin died, that he had no problem with. What Rabbi Yosef had a problem with saying that when Rebbe died, humility died, because I am here and I am humble. Rav Nachman, conversely, his problem was not with the word anava, his problem was with the word Mishameis Rebbe batul yiras chet. On this Gemara, which literally concludes the entire tractate of Soita, there are various questions. Some come to most people's mind, and some are questions when we reflect upon it a little deeper. Number one, the obvious question. If Rabbi Yosef is truly an embodiment of humility, how does he stand up and say, don't say that when Rebbe passed away, humility went with him, because look at me, I am the embodiment of Anava, me and Rebbe. How does a truly humble person boast in such a fashion? Isn't that by definition the very contradiction to a life of humbleness and humility? When the humble person declares publicly, or to the Tana, and it's recorded in the Gemara, I am Amma. What does that say about the nature of his humility? Number two, how can Rabbi Yosef, and for the same aspect, Reb Nachman, how can they argue with the Mishnah? The Mishnah was authored by Tanoim. Rabbi Yosef and Reb Nachman were Amoraim. In the historical evolution of the Jewish people, a Tana can argue with a Tana, an Amora can argue with an Amora, but an Amora cannot argue with a Tana. Once the Mishnah was sealed, the Talmudic sages of the Gemara, authored by the Amoraim, could not refute or argue with a Mishnah. There are stages in the history of the Jewish people. There are the Tanoim, there are the Amoraim, there are the Goinim, there are the Rishonim, there are the Achroinim. And when a certain era comes to closure, the rabbis and sages of the subsequent era don't argue with the sages of the previous era. Sensitive to the truth that the previous era housed and produced people of a completely different caliber. Yet Rabbi Yosef comes along and he argues with the Mishnah. The Mishnah says, Mishemeis Rebbe Batal Anov. Comes Rabbi Yosef and he says, no. When Rebbe died, the Anova was not nullified. I'm still here. I'm alive. You might argue that Rabbi Yosef was suggesting that the version of the Mishnah is erroneous. The Mishnah never said Batal Anov. It's a mistake that creeped in. But then the terminology would have been different. Often in Gemara we have the following expression, Sami Mikan, which means take it away from the Mishnah, remove it. It's a mistake that creeped into the text. Sami Mikan, take it away from it. Rabbi Yosef doesn't say it's a wrong version. He says, Loi Tisni, don't teach it. Don't say it, don't repeat it. He told the Tana, don't repeat it. The change of vernacular, he didn't say Sami Mikan, take it out of the Mishnah. He said Loi Tisni indicates that this was in the Mishnah, even according to Rabbi Yosef. He just felt it can't be taught, but how could he argue? How can he argue with the Mishnah? The third question, between Rebbe and Rabbi Yosef, there were many generations. As I said, Rebbe was a Tana, Rabbi Yosef was an Amora. In the later generations of Amora, Rabbi Yosef had a Rebbe, his Rebbe had a Rebbe. How is it that throughout all of these generations, nobody argued with the Mishnah? All of the great rabbis and sages, including the Rebbe of Rabbi Yosef, were content with the words and the statement, Mishemeis Rebbe Batal Anova. When Rebbe died, humility died with him. Till Rabbi Yosef, all the great rabbis had no problem. Nobody said, the Ikana, I'm here. And Rabbi Yosef was aware of this. His own Rebbe didn't say it. His Rebbe didn't say it. His colleagues didn't say it. Their Rebbes didn't say it. It was only Rabbi Yosef who suddenly comes along and says, sorry, this can't be taught anymore. I am humble. How did Rabbi Yosef in his own mind justify the fact that all of these great sages that preceded him were certainly humble people, great people? He was students of them. He received Torah from them. And yet, they would not say that they're humble. And Rabbi Yosef, he is the first one after generations which studied the Mishnah and Saita and embraced it and taught it. And from all of them, nobody had a problem. And he's the first one who says, you can't teach another day Kamayim here. So tonight I want to share with you one explanation on this Gemara that was presented by the Rebbe at a Fabrengen of Shabbos Parshas Bamidbar Tovshin Chav Dalet. The Shabbos before Shavuos, 1964, when the Rebbe made a siyum on Masechta Sotah, when he concluded Masechta Sotah, as he would often do on the day of Erev Shavuos, or a few days before Shavuos, or sometimes on Shavuos, or the Shabbos after Shavuos. Sometimes in all of the occasions, one after the other, he would continue the discussion. The Rebbe would often make a siyum on Masechta Soita because of the above-mentioned custom to study it between Pesach and Shavuos. In that particular year, Tovshin Chavdala, the Rebbe presented a novel explanation to this Gemara, and some of the points of that explanation we will share this evening in the Shir. The Rebbe gave two introductions. Number one, as you know, the system of learning in the time of the Gemara was that there was something called a Meturgaman. Meturgaman meant every great rabbi had somebody to interpret his words, to expound on them, to explain them to the crowd. So the teacher, the great rabbi, would communicate the message to the Meturgaman quietly, and then the Meturgaman would stand up on the bima and communicate it to the entire audience of students, of pupils, of disciples who were assembled there, and he would expound and explain and interpret and elaborate on the words of the rabbi. That's point number one, introduction number one. In fact, the Masechta Soita tells the great story of, fascinating story of the two wives, the wife of the rabbi and the wife of the interpreter, who had a shtickle argument. This is earlier in Masechta Soita. The wife of the interpreter told the wife of the rabbi that my husband doesn't really need your husband. Just doing it for his respect. He listens and he explains, but there's no real need for him. He's as great and so forth. And of course, the wife immediately tells her husband, his name was Rebbe Avo. And she was upset. How does this guy who's your Meturgaman, he's insulting you? And Rebbe Avo said the famous words, "My ichpaslach, what do you care?" He tells his Rebbe, "What do you care if he feels that way?" Miniu minei iskalis beila. Whether it's from me or from him, let God be praised. Is it really important that I should be getting the credit? So there was always the rabbi and the Meturgaman, the one who interpreted, who presented it to the crowd. Another introduction. Torah is Torah's emes. It's truth. Yet you have to know who you're talking to. Sometimes students are not receptacles to hear everything at a particular point of their lives. Not because the message is not true, but because the person does not have the maturity or the depth to be capable of internalizing the message and understanding it appropriately. They may hear it, they may think they understand it, but they may just not be ready for it yet. And a good Rebbe, a good teacher understands this. Just as in any field of wisdom, there is what you teach the 10-year-old and how you teach the 15-year-old and how you teach the 20-year-old. Based on their intellectual capacity, their experience, their background knowledge, and so forth. The same, and certainly it's true lahavdil with Torah as well. Based on these two introductions, the Rebbe understands the Gemara at the end of Soita in the following fashion. Amalei Rabbi Yosef Latana. Rabbi Yosef was addressing the Tana, the teacher, who was expounding on the Mishnah and explaining it to his students, Rabbi Yosef's students. Rabbi Yosef would give over a Mishnah to the Meturgaman, to the Tana, to the interpreter, to present it to his students with his own explanations or ideas or deductions and so forth. And the Tana would give it over. Amalei Rabbi Yosef Latana. Rabbi Yosef told the Tana. He told it to the one presenting it. He said, Loi tisna nova. When you teach this Mishnah, don't tell the students this line. Mishameis Rebbe Batla nova. Teach them Mishemeis Rabbi Batal Yiraschei. Don't say Mishemeis Rabbi Batal Anava. Why? The Ikana, because there's me. What he meant by the words the Ikana was not I embody humility, hence even after Rebbe passed away there is still humility in the world. Look at me. What he meant was, don't teach it to my students the Ikana because there's me. They believe me to be the embodiment of humility in this world. And when they will hear the words of the Mishnah, Mishemeis Rebbe Batul Anava, one of two things might happen. Either they will Chalila begin to doubt the authority and the authenticity of the Mishnah, seeing and knowing with all their heart and conviction that Rabbi Yosef is humble, or conversely, they may begin to doubt profoundly and seriously the sincerity of Rabbi Yosef as their Rebbe. They will begin to question his rights to serve as their mentor and teacher, the man who they looked up to. From Rabbi Yosef's individual personal perspective, there was no problem with the text of the Mishnah, Mishemeis Rabbi Batal Anava v'Yiraschei. For all the generations before Rabbi Yosef, after Rabbi, there was no problem with the words Mishemeis Rabbi Batal Anava. Why? They might have been humble people, but there are levels in humility. And relative to the level of humility embodied by Rabbeinu Yehuda Hanasi, their humility cannot be described as genuine anava. Sure, relative to people around them, they may have been humble, they may have been pious, but relative to what anava really means, Mishemeis Rebbe Batal Anava. And all the previous generations understood this, the Rebbes understood it, the students understood it, that although their teachers were great men, and great men of humility, it is not a contradiction to the Mishemeis Rebbe Batal Anava, because there's anava and there's anava. There's humility and there's humility. Just like there's kindness and kindness, there's piety and piety, there's selflessness and selflessness, there's idealism and idealism. There are levels, there are gradations, and sometimes in one generation there is a particular level of anava. In another generation, that anava is non-existent. Although there are great people of humility, but it's totally not comparable to the anava of Rebbe. Just as we understand in scholarship. You'll take a personality like the Rogatchover Gaon. There are many Goinim. There were Goinim in his generation. There are Goinim in this generation. Jews who know Shas and know Halacha and know Gemara, Rashi, Tosfos and know Rishonim and know Acharonim, and you call them a Gaon. But can you even compare their genius, their scholarship, to a Goinis like of the Rogatchover? Anybody familiar even slightly with the perspective, with the Torah, with the Shittas, with the philosophies, with the Derech HaLimud of the Rogatchover Gaon of Rabbi Yosef Rosen knows it's totally of a different caliber. Like Rabbi Meir Simcha, the Sameach, Rabbi Meir Simcha Kohen of Dvinsk. They were once, he was the Misnagdasher Rav of Dvinsk, and the Rogatchover was the Chsidisher Rav of Dvinsk. So they were once extolling the virtues of the Rogatchover, and somebody said he has a phenomenal memory. And Rabbi Simcha says it's not true, he doesn't have a phenomenal memory. Phenomenal memory would be something that you learned a long time ago, and time has passed, and most people would forget it, but you remember it. He says the Rogatchover sees the whole Torah at every moment. It's an open book. Every Tosfos, every Rambam, every Rishon, every Yerushalmi, every line of Kol HaTorah Kula he sees in front of him. It's not a memory. But a person has to have the maturity and the sensitivity and the awareness to understand this. So when you say when a person dies, Goinis die, doesn't mean nobody afterwards knows how to learn. But that level is finished. It's gone. So Rabbi Yosef had no problem, Mishemeis Rabbi Batal Anava, just like his Rebbe had no problem, and his Rebbe had no problem. But what happens sometimes is, as generations progress, digress, and advance and continue, Sometimes people don't even understand the language barrier. They're not sensitive to the fact that they're insensitive. They're ignorant of their ignorance. And here you have to be careful. When you're dealing with a generation, Rabbi Yosef says, who appreciates levels of anava, learn the Mishnah, teach the Mishnah. When you're dealing with my students, he tells the teacher, I know my students. They can't appreciate the words Mishameis Rebbe Batul Anava according to its true context and meaning. Thus don't teach them this line, because when they look at me, I embody to them the greatest level of humility. And when they hear in the Mishnah Mishameis Rebbe Batul Anava, their ability to receive from me the Torah and the yirah and the inspiration and the halacha that they receive from me on a daily basis will be severely damaged. Rabbi Yosef himself knows that his humility doesn't come close to Rebbe's, nor he might even consider himself as a humble person. The Gemara says in Pesachim that Rabbi Yosef used to celebrate Shavuos, Samachesam et Beis. He said he loved Hayoim et Kagarim Kama Yosef Ikebeshruka. If not for this great day, how many Yosefs are there in the marketplace? There are many Joes out there in the street. This day set me apart, it made me unique. So Rabbi Yosef acknowledged that his greatness is due to Hayoim Kagarim. It's the day, it's not even him. But his students, he felt, were not ready to hear this. It's similar to what the Gemara tells the story in Brachas, that when Rabbi said, Kigoyna no beinini, I am a beinini, amalei Abaye le'shavik marchaya l'chol beri. His student Abaye said, you're not letting anybody live. So the Rebbe explains in that Farbrengen, one of the possible meanings here is, Abaye said, you may be a beinini, but if it's declared, when you declare that you are a beinini, it may shake up the foundations of your students. So this is the meaning of Rabbi Yosef's words, which answers all of the questions. Rabbi Yosef was telling the Tana, you have to be sensitive to who my students are. It wasn't because of his arrogance, Chalila. It was because of his dedication to the students, understanding their needs, their sensitivities, their sensibilities. Don't ruin it for them. Don't delegitimize Rabbi Yosef in their eyes, because you're not giving them another Rabbi Yosef, and the only thing you may be accomplishing is that their perspective on Rabbi Yosef is profoundly altered and metamorphosized, and that can only cause weakness and decadence in their relationship to Rabbi Yosef as a teacher and a pupil. And from this, the Rebbe derived during that Farbrengen a great lesson to each and every one of us. He said, sometimes you look at a person who's successful in communication. This person is successful as a teacher, as a communicator, as a mentor, as a lamplighter. This person is successful in teaching, inspiring, kindling hearts, kindling sparks, igniting souls, stimulating brains. But you know that this person has flaws. And this person may have severe flaws. And sometimes you are absolutely right. And there are times and there are people who have an inclination to talk about these flaws, to explain to the students who look up so much to this person, let me tell you the real story. Calm down. Don't get so excited. Let me describe to you the real story behind this person. And you can, of course, go on and explain his motivations and the narcissism and the craving for power and egotism and popularity and the rosebuds and the voids and the flaws and the insecurities and all of the psychological, emotional, spiritual issues that this person has. And you know what? You may be perfectly right. And not only that, It may be even worse than you're describing it. Zog the Rebbe, it is a mistake to do so. And the reason it's a mistake is because you're not giving this person's students or pupils or disciples or friends a replacement. What you are doing is you're depriving them from a source of inspiration, of wisdom, of scholarship, of depth that they had in their lives. If the teacher, whose flaws you are so intimately aware of, is communicating to them falsehood, if he is perverting them, Khalillah, if he is taking them off the right track, if he is telling them inappropriate ideas, communicating inappropriate ideas, fine. But you know that what he's teaching them is true. He is giving them a love for Torah, he's giving them a love for Yiddishkeit, he's giving them a sensitivity to Yerushalayim, a depth in Avos Yisrael, and Avos Hashem, and in Avos HaTorah. He or she may have various flaws, various sins, various transgressions, and so on and so forth. No need, the Rebbe expressed himself to announce it from all the roofs. A replacement you're not giving them. Another Rebbe Yosef you will not give these people. Elamai, you will just deprive them of the trust, of the confidence that they could look up to this person and receive from him. What did you gain? Was your gain really much greater than your loss? So now they know about all of his flaws, and you may be right, but now they could look up to nobody. Now they have nobody to look up to. And this is true not only if you're making a mistake, even if you're right. Since you don't have bias, kivayachal, you don't have an ego, you don't have his ego, so you know all of his flaws. And as the Rebbe said, it's important for you to announce his flaws, because this person who is successful may be diminishing your own ego, may be challenging your own confidence, may be making you sick because of his success. So you can't just sit quietly and take it in. How could you? You have to immediately cut down the person so you'll feel better. Amar Reb Yosef Latana loy tisna nava. You may know the truth, but don't ruin it for these students. They're getting something good in their life. Allow them to be connected to something. Is it a perfect situation? It's not a perfect situation. Is it a perfect world? It's not a perfect world. Is it a perfect teacher? It's not a perfect teacher. But it's a teacher who's doing good things, who's saying good things. Help them out, encourage them, encourage them. Don't cut them down. And this lesson the Rebbe articulated, I think we can all understand is quite relevant to us. Many of us have a proclivity, a natural habit to cut people down. There are many communities, some of you are familiar with them, where it's simply hard to respect people. There is a culture of disrespect for people. Why? Because people are imperfect. People have flaws. People make mistakes. Some people have serious flaws. So there are some communities or some cultures where the instinctive pattern is cut them down. Expose everything. Let the world know the truth about everybody. So then nobody can respect anybody. Is this an appropriate approach? What is gained? What is gained is that a teenager has nobody he could respect. A child has nobody he could respect. A mother of a home has nobody she could respect. A father, nobody can respect. Nobody they can look up to. Nobody they can listen to. Nobody they can ask advice from. Nobody who can challenge them, who can show them that they may be making an error. Because who can you really respect? And in some places there are filing cabinets. On every person there's a file. And when the time is appropriate, that file is opened, and we have all of his past, and his father's past, and his mother's past, and his grandmother's past, and his grandfather from before the war, and siblings, and uncles, and aunts, and right away we know you can't take him seriously. But if the reality on the ground is that this human being, this individual man or this individual woman, is helping people's lives, is inspiring people, is teaching people, is communicating to people, is a leader in some form or fashion and leading in a good way, in a productive way, in a meaningful way, why are you taking that away from his students and pupils and children and Talmidim and Mushpayim? Don't take it away from them. You're not giving them a replacement. Don't take it away from them. You have to be very careful before you cut down a teacher, before you cut down a mentor, before you cut down a rabbi, before you cut down a person who's in a position of influence and influencing people in a positive way, because this may be the only wellspring from which certain Jews are receiving their connection, commitment, and passion towards Torah and mitzvahs. You may have another source. God bless you. Asay lecha Rav, you choose your Rav. Don't take it away from somebody else. This sikha gives us also another lesson in the converse way. Sometimes individually we look at ourselves and we know who we are. And we know our issues and we know our problems and we know our insecurities and we know our flaws. And many of us who are in the position, we have the talent, we have the resources to give to people. We delegitimize ourselves by saying, I'm not the one to do the job. We should be getting somebody who's more qualified, who's more pious, who's more holy, who's less sinful, who's more spiritual. I'm not the person for the job. And you may be right, idealistically. But remember, if there are individuals who in the circumstances of the moment will receive only from you, don't deprive them from what you can give them. The fact that you have to work on yourself, the fact that you have to challenge yourself, the fact that you have to make a cheshbon hanefesh, where you're standing with yourself and in your relationship with God and with truth, no question. The fact that you have to work on yourself every day of your life, no question about it. But Rabbi Yosef is coming and telling us, when there are people out there whom you can influence, whom you can teach, whom you can inspire, whom you can elevate to a greater place, don't start delegitimizing yourself because you may be right in every statement you're making. But if the conclusion is that there is a community of Jews, or there's a group of Jews, or there are a group of people, or one individual, who are being deprived from their relationship to the Makar Mayim Chayim, to the source of living water, you do not have the luxury and the privilege to deprive them from what their soul is yearning for. Have a wonderful evening.